loud one, just a silent one. I presume you've done it.
Yep, we're live.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to the Common Sense SEO Show number 25. We're a quarter of a century old, halfway through the year as well. So wow, we're really moving forward fast, and I hope that everybody else is keeping up with their businesses, hitting their achievements for their attainments and their targets for the year, because you're halfway through and it's downhill from here. So socks up and let's move on. Henrik, what have you got to tell us in the way of housekeeping, please?
We have a question. Can anybody see and hear us?
I thought for one scary moment that somebody had asked a question about that, the intro, and I was thinking, oh my God.
At least we have Terry here. Hello, Terry. Yeah, everybody can watch the show. So over to Tony again.
Yeah, brilliant. So in a sort of a way, we're carrying on from last week's theme, and in a way we're not, because we're venturing down yet another rabbit hole, or another sort of area of contention and mass confusion and misunderstanding and argument maybe. So on the show today, I'm very pleased to welcome Caroline. Hello, Caroline Holzman.
Thank you. Hi, Tony.
Hello there. And Caroline is a self-confessed expert on duplicate content. So that's what the show is all about. We're gonna one of the thing about last week was that we sort of had Adrian on, didn't we? And he was talking about running an SEO agency, and we thought it'd be nice to hear how the same sort of thing was how you're running an SEO agency from a female perspective as well, because obviously everybody brings a different angle to the show, and we thought it'd be nice to have somebody on. We asked Caroline, and Caroline mentioned the fact that one of her sort of areas of interest, shall we say, or specialism, is around duplicate content, and being as that is one of those eternal topics that always raises its head whenever content is mentioned, we thought, isn't it a really good opportunity to talk about that? So Caroline, do you want to sort of start us off by giving us a bit of a background into where you're coming from and why we're talking about duplicate content today?
Sure. I guess everybody comes to SEO somehow. You know, there's many roads to it. Mine was through, I was a business owner, and I had a studio that we did a lot of production. And so anyway, so in that case, I kind of come through it with that understanding of, you know, what a lot of business owners go through, the things that concern them. And also, in some ways, some of the I think I would phrase it more as like overvaluing the things that they know and undervaluing the things that they don't. So I've kind of lived both sides of that, and came to SEO for my own company, and got to page 1 for a very competitive search term nationally. And right about that time, if I say April 2012, it was actually on my birthday that Penguin hit, and it hit hard and completely took my site out for that term. So I understand the power of SEO and the flip side of SEO, you know, when you do it in a way that it may work, but it may not be sustainable in that way. So that's pretty much how I came to it. I also felt very strongly that in terms of the economy, that there were a lot of really good businesses that needed this kind of help. They may have had a marketing director, they did a newsletter, they went to conventions, they did everything right, but they still couldn't be found. And so that is pretty much how I worked my way into what I do now, which is I'm head of the on-page SEO for over-the-top SEO, and I'm incredibly fortunate to work with Clint Butler, and it's kind of like a dream come true. So I have incredible tools and resources, and I can really focus on the things that I want to do, which is how do I make this better? How do I make this more relevant? How does this site relate in the search engines? And pretty much removing all the things that stop it from relating as well as it could, which right now is a big topic. You know, I think the on-page SEO is, you know, it's kind of like the, what did they say, the redheaded stepchild, I think, of the SEO, because we want it to be so sexy and not necessarily all the little niggly details. And really, I appreciate your introduction saying that I'm an expert on duplicate content. I would have to say that it's more one of my pet peeves, because it's a real thing, but there's so much confusion in our industry in terms of what is it exactly. And one of the things that, you know, when you really see duplicate content, it's very clear. But I find myself, even in the industry and talking with other SEOs or people who practice SEO, it's that they really confuse it. They think syndicated content is duplicate SEO, and it's kind of like there's so much misunderstanding about that once you realize what it is, then you can take steps to actually eliminate it, and it reduces the fear. I think there's a lot of times people don't take any action because they're like, oh, I don't want to walk into that duplicate content penalty, and then they're talking about things that it couldn't possibly be by its nature. It couldn't possibly be duplicate content. It's more of a syndicated content issue. And
yeah, like when they're sort of pushing out through IFTT a post snippet out to Facebook or Blogger or wherever, for example.
yes.
Yeah,
So,
that'd be ridiculous if that was duplicate, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, and you know, and again, it's a real thing. Don't get me wrong, but it's not very often what people think it is. And so, and then of course, you know, dealing with the fact that I think a lot of us work in WordPress. I know there's the HTML chorus over off to the side saying, "Not me, not me." But if I think most businesses that I work with, they're WordPress based. So taking care of sealing up those kinds of issues. You know, if I have total control over it, I know I do what I do. But it's kind of like when you're trying to convince a site owner that this is not a good thing. You know, they have no concept. So I see it from both sides. It's kind of like the people that really are subject to a duplicate content penalty don't understand how bad it is. And then in our industry, sometimes we use the same term to discuss something completely different. So I think it's very confusing. It creates confusion in the profession.
Yeah, just stepping back a couple of years on what you just said on your intro there. You mentioned that you came to SEO because of your business needs. Had you explored the SEO marketplace at that point? I mean, had you been using an agency and been frustrated, or did you just maybe not even know that agents existed and just thought that this needs doing, so I'm going to hit it head on? Or was it financial? Why did you start doing this yourself?
Well, a lot of times, and this is like, what is it? It's not a fault, it's a feature. You know, I think I can figure most things out. I was about 20, you know, it was about, I hate to say it, about 20 years into the business and of what I was doing, and realized that, you know, I needed to market the company. Word of mouth was great, and I was getting a lot of that, but my clientele was getting older. Some of them were just completely getting out of what they were doing. It was a lot of music based. It was CD manufacturing, CD and DVD. So a lot of them were, you know, getting out of the music. So I had a friend who invited me to one of these big pitch fests up in Dallas. And I thought, what have I got to lose? So I went with some friends, and there was a guy sitting next to me. He was actually sick that weekend, and pretty grumpy. And so we kept 2 chairs in between us. I didn't want to get sick. And so anyway, it was all about how to write content and sell content online, information marketing. And the very last day, the last speaker got up on the stage, and I knew it was about SEO. And of course, I was thinking, oh gosh, I had such a heavy lunch. I'm going to fall asleep through this. And he started speaking. Turned out it was the guy sitting next to me, 2 seats over. And it was, he was the SEO for Armin Morin. And so he started demonstrating up on stage, what it was that he did. And while everybody else was falling asleep and slouching in their chairs, I got so excited because I was like, this I understand. It's all about leverage. And so I ended up working with him for a year, using my company as a guinea pig. So we did it by Skype. He was based in London. And his name is Gareth Owens. And it was absolutely, I couldn't believe, not only for myself, for the company, it was good, but I just really, it was one of those things where I was like, gosh, I feel like I found my calling, but I still have this business I have to run, and so consequently, I think circumstances worked out really well. So I experienced what it was like to become a business owner, not necessarily an enhanced job. So it was having people work for me, and I could really focus on literally the marketing of the company. And I had a blast with it. It was so much fun. I was like, how can I do more? So that's when I started I was in a business park, so I started talking to my neighbors and just asked them, how are you doing? What's going on? Have you ever thought about this? Let me show you what I did for myself. And they could see the number of cars, was increasing. They could see the shipments were increasing. They were like, yeah, we've been wondering what you've been doing differently. So that's how I started. I didn't really think of it necessarily as an agency at the time. It was more, I do believe as SEOs, we are job creators.
And I guess because of the industry, it's probably quite fortuitous as well, wasn't it? Because, of course, the CD industry has probably took a bit of a dive in the last 10 years or so, hasn't it? Yeah. So, it's just you reinvented yourself without even realizing what the destiny would have been anyway.
Correct.
Yeah. So that's good. But
and the Penguin thing, when Penguin hit, what was so great about Penguin is that it really pushed me out to discover who else is doing this, who else was impacted by this. And I remember Dory Friend started doing a lot of just sort of like, hey, let's all get together and talk about what we're seeing and that kind of thing. And so when my son was at Little League, I was huddled in the bleachers listening to the webinars. I couldn't see them, but I could hear them. And this is before we knew what it was. And so then, of course, I went to her first event, which was like the SEO Rockstars. Yeah. And that was really the first time I saw, oh my gosh, other people are really doing this. And it was also the first time I met other women doing this, which was kind of eye-opening and reassuring and validating at the same time. Yeah. So that's kind of how I got into there. I met Clint at the SEO Rockstars about 5 years ago now. And so, we knew of each other, and we kind of, with the testing, I met Kyle through John Limbacher, Kyle Roof. And so we were chatting, after one of those things, and like going, it'd be really great if we could just know that something works as opposed to, guess. And so he and I started talking about testing. So, and So by the end of the day, I had like my first 2 test sites up, and I'm like, okay, we're going to figure this out. Like should your title and your header be identical? Because there was so much chatter in all the SEO rooms about, everybody's opinion about this or that or whatever. And so we just decided the first test should be that.
And it's funny. I don't know, but people, it's like the groups we're in with the RFR and places like that. People get buried in I don't know, all these strategies, the stacking and the backlinking and this, that, and the other. And really, I mean, the on page is so critical, isn't it? The foundation there is so critical to that page success, because if the on page isn't right, you can throw whatever you want, and it's still going to be vulnerable. With a Google update or with or without Google updates, it's and there's always a danger of riding trends. Whereas I know on page has got certain areas, there's certain factors, aren't there, that come into being more strongly at any given time. But I mean, as is shown on the SEO Fight Club there, isn't it? I mean, they're always, whenever the highlighting the strengths, they are transient in a lot of ways. But if you really boil down to the basic SEO, it takes a lot of beating. I mean, I can't say too much, but I know, Henrik, we've been playing around with some this week, and the results are just phenomenal, just from sticking to basic SEO principles before we start throwing backlinks around the place. So it is an important thing, isn't it? I mean, I don't know whether you want to add anything at this point, Henrik.
No, well, we was just playing around with some stuff, and decided to say, well, let's title this properly, and then we just started posting we'll make the category pages and supporting pages, and within 3 days we were ranking. So
yeah, just good old-fashioned SEO. Yeah, good old-fashioned SEO, competitive market as well. So there we go. It was testing, and it worked very well. And that's before we start doing any fancy stuff or anything like that. So it's always worth bearing in mind. So anyway, now when we get to,
if I could say one thing too, is that I think deep at heart I'm a little bit more of a control freak. So I'd much rather have it be something that is within my control, which is on page.
Yeah.
Than putting so much faith in things that I have no control over.
Yeah, I think it's just lacking a bit of shiny new object, isn't it? I suppose for many, when we're brought up with a new WSO every week or every other day or something, and I suppose on page can get a little bit boring in that for those who like the new all the time. But definitely it's worth sticking to it, isn't it? And understanding, of course. Yeah. So yeah.
We're seeing how many products has been sold with a print your own money button, and it never works. I don't know why.
No, it's great, isn't it? Until 3 days later, and then move on to the next one and the next one. So right, okay. So let's bring this back round again to the to duplicate content. So maybe we could just throw a couple of examples in there. Local business. This is one of the main things that a lot of people are focused on these days, around GMB and around local business websites. I mean, do you have any involvement in the GMBs at all, Caroline?
I do. I mean, I have an affinity towards local because I feel like it's more real. For the most part, they're real people with real businesses and real dreams. And so, yeah, I do. I play around a lot in the GMB.
So how would you say, so actually on the GMB website, not the GMB, sorry, going back to the actual organic, the main website of a business, is how would you address say somebody that wants to rank in the suburbs of a city? Would you quite happily go in and do city pages? And how would you structure those, if without giving too many of the trade secrets away? How much would you look to structure those pages so you was avoiding any duplication, or clarify the fact that, well, there is no duplication because it's local, or whatever? How would you deal with that issue?
Well, I'm involved in a pretty large project for that, for one of our clients, and I look at the neighborhoods themselves. I try and develop content, because usually if it's about that neighborhood, I'm not taking an article and then spinning it and, replacing the zip codes or things like that. So it's a little more local, a little more what kind of, things to do in that area, that kind of thing. And using that to also incorporate like those near me searches.
Yeah.
So
and this is siloed, I presume, is it?
Yeah, usually there's one page that may list all the neighborhoods that I'm focusing on, and then those link out to individual neighborhood pages, and then of course linking back so that if there's any bot activity, it kind of like loops around and goes through. And I'm a big fan of schema. It's a love-hate relationship because you get the wrong kind of apostrophe in there and it's not valid. And I always like work on it really long, and then I send it to Clint and go, will you look at this for me? And he's like, oh, your apostrophe is wrong. Like, oh, okay. It's always something like that. I always think it's going to be more difficult. But using those kinds of things and then hiding in a lot of times the iframe, putting in some additional schema in there, and so just trying to do as much as I can on page to make it very clear what it's about.
And local images and
yes.
So on and so forth. Yeah. So it is about spending the time, and it is about spending that time. If you're trying to rank in those areas, and it's worth building something that's unique for that area and building some what's the word, recognition for the audience, for your target audience, so that when they land on that page, there's elements of familiarity there, like a picture of the local landmark or whatever.
Right. I always like to find something that Google already associates with that location, and sort of use that image.
Yeah, I mean, I saw somewhere the other day, I was watching something, and he was like going out there and getting a video of stood there talking about the product, but with that suburb behind him, as a backdrop. With a sort of a to say if it's the local, I don't know, whatever's famous for that suburb, whether it's a church or whatever, if that was in the background, or a leisure centre or something, if that was in the background, then there's an instant recognition and an instant affinity for the people that are watching. There's that touch point to touch in there, where people sort of actually get to like you more because they think, oh, hang on, I know that place, I recognise that. It's got to help, but you
got to have a budget for that, right?
Yeah, I mean, but the person who cited this could probably go out and do that with his iPhone, maybe. Yeah, but it would be if you had like 20,000 pages, and you don't really want to be, you'd be gone forever, wouldn't you? You'd have to come out of the woods. That's
what is that? So,
but what about okay? So let's turn this on the other side and mass page. I mean, is that the enemy to you? Is that the devil in disguise?
No, not at all. I mean, I know there's a value for being able to do things at scale, but I also look at it like, would this small local roofing company, would they really do that? Would they suddenly have balloon to this many pages? And so I do kind of think along those lines, like what would appear normal. And this is not based on any data. I'm simply saying that I think a lot of people that kind of work at Google and write out these, things, these filtering things, probably not a lot of them have owned their own business. So they kind of think about the businesses they know. And I think, again, it's not scientific data by any means, but my thought is I think people associate certain activities with the things that they know.
Yeah, it's common sense, really, isn't it? It is. I mean, this is one of the things I've always done when I've done the UX user experience. The click-through rate and all this. When I've ever done tests on that, I always think, well, hang on a minute. This is a plumber in a 50,000 population town. How many visits is it really going to get in a day?
Exactly.
So there's no point in sending 200 clicks a day at it when probably it's only ever had 9 a day organically. you know, you asking
No,
for
if
trouble,
you
really,
look
aren't you?
at the monthly search volume and you see there's 10 searches per month for this
Yeah.
term, and suddenly you get 500 hits, that's
Yeah.
abnormal, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Henrik, is there any questions over there by any chance?
Yeah. Let me see. Adrian, is duplicate content the same as cannibalization? No, because cannibalization is when you cannibalize your keyword, for instance, on your URL structure or on your site navigation. Isn't that correct?
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, the way I see cannibalization is where you're sort of diluting the keywords, where you're taking the focus away from the primary keyword on the page. Sorry, Caroline, you're...
well, you know, like let's say you have two articles and they're written on the same topic, and you've optimized them both for the same, or so closely related that Google kind of gets confused about which one is stronger, so they both kind of get pushed down. And it's really funny. It's easy to see when it's cannibalization. Looking at, you know, I had a situation where a client had two really close content pages on a certain product that they sold, and every time I looked at, you know, where were they for this keyword, you know, I saw it almost every day. It was alternating between one day it'd be one page, the next day it would be another. And then sometimes they would both, you know, show up, but they would be even lower down on a page. So, but I wouldn't consider that duplicate content, because they're probably, you know, compared to each other, they would be unique to each other, but the topic is not unique on the site, if that makes sense.
So what you're saying is, as I said, you cannibalize your URL structure, so Google don't know whether it's one or the other.
Well, the content on the page.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's similar, but
you know, a simple way to check for that, because I think as business owners and certainly as SEOs, we really, you know, adding fresh content so the bots keep coming, right? So sometimes you think you're coming at a topic from a different angle, but in reality, you know, this is something that's mathematically seeing your page and seeing where you put the keywords and all that kind of stuff. So it's literally, if you search for it, like, you know, site, so you look at your site and then search for your keyword. And if you've already got a page that's already ranking for that, I would say rather than put the energy into writing another page, is I would, if you feel you need to add something to that page, make that page better so that it stands out. And you know, Marie Yesayas is the she and Moon are the cannibalization queens, but they'll always say, you know, if you're ranking 1 and 2, don't worry about that. You know, it's when you're further down the page or on page 2 and you have 2 pages that are jockeying for position, do something about those. But that's not duplicate content.
No, but Google also actually take those situations into account and recommend that you may be better off doing a one-pager rather than doing 2-pager, because you will rank for more keywords because you're actually stacking the content rather than trying to compete with yourself, so to speak.
Right. In that case, don't be your own competition.
Yeah, I suppose one good example is like when you're trying to, if you're trying to rank for SEO agency, and then suddenly you find yourself also at top, although you've optimized your page around SEO agency, you find yourself at the top for digital marketing and whatever else, you know, that sort of thing, because Google automatically. I know this is not the same thing, is it? But Google automatically rank you for these other semantically linked terms So if you already, what Caroline's saying there is if you're already ranking for those terms, then don't bother trying to build a page around those terms, because you could be sort of building in some sort of confusion into the structure. Yeah.
David has a question to say, I've seen some SEO consultants use the same article and just changed out the NAP and links on different brands they own to syndicate out for that particular brand. Your thoughts on that?
Can you say that again?
Yeah, so I've seen some SEO consultants use the same article for just changed out the NAP and links on different brands that they own to syndicate out for the particular brand. Your thoughts on that? I think you already touched it, Caroline.
Oh, they're not just using it for duplicate content or mass content across that one site. They're actually using the same articles for many different clients and just changing out the NAP.
And the brands.
Okay. And the brand. That's an interesting one, Caroline.
Content is, can we just say it? Content is a bitch. And it is hard to, I think, unless you want to invest the time into creating the different articles. I've seen a similar thing on that, and I presume you're talking about an agency that is doing it for themselves.
I think so.
Yeah, I see that a lot, and I think that falls under the category of, the shoemaker's children always go barefoot.
Yeah.
And so what we should do, I think, for ourselves is what we do for others. Take the time to, and of course we all know we're competing for very similar terms, right? So we're gonna, if we know what we're doing, we're gonna probably max out our own on-page similarities. So then now we're forced to go into that next level of what happens offsite, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, we picked up a client site the other week, didn't we, Henrik? And when we looked at it had location pages that had been created several years ago now, and when we looked at them, every page is almost identical. The content is identical, except the only thing that changes is the district. But now all those pages are there, as far as I know. I'm sure they are. They're all indexed. They're all ranking, but they're ranking poorly. So, you could possibly get away with doing that, but it's not advisable, because they're certainly not getting any favors, and they're not getting any benefits from having those duplicate or replicated articles across the site, because it certainly isn't appearing in page 1 or page 2. That's for sure. But it's not. It doesn't appear to have been penalized for being duplicate either.
Well, and we're also looking at the situation of what is the purpose of these pages, right? We don't want to rank for the purpose of ranking. We want to, if it's for ourselves, we want to convert clients, convert looky-loos into clients. And if a client sees that, to a large degree, I think it doesn't really speak to the technical knowledge that probably is possessed by that agency, right? Because they're going to think, oh, I can do this myself. I'll just take the same thing and change my stuff. You know what I'm saying? It leaves a huge. I don't think it ends the search for a person who's looking for help.
No, I think in this case it was a web designer who had tried to do a bit of SEO for a client and failed. Well, I don't think he realized he'd failed, but this is the thing, you see. This is one of the things that I've noticed over the years, is when I start looking around at web designers, they don't necessarily understand SEO, and people go to web designer, they probably don't realize they need SEO as well. But the damage has been done, and nobody really knows, because the web designer doesn't really know that they're missing dropping the ball on the SEO side of things, and the client doesn't know, because they think they paid for a website, and so everything's hunky dory. It's been done by a professional.
It's kind of like saying you're on a diet, and this person who checked you out, who ran you through the line in who you paid for your groceries is going to let you know if you buy something that's not good for you.
Yeah, but unfortunately that happens, doesn't it? It just does happen, which is and you know that was one of the reasons I got into SEO several years ago, was because it was an ex-wife who had a site very badly done by a local web designer, and when I started looking around, I thought, oh my God, this is awful. It's every web designer, well, not every web designer, but pretty much every web designer around here anyway. And, and I just thought, oh my God. But then there's no way that we could get out there and change the world on that front, because people will still go to web designers. They'll still go to, the one, whatever the done for you pages and the Wix and whatever else. But that's what the show is for, isn't it? To educate.
Right. Well, and I think it's the kind of thing too that not every person who has a website or is building a website is ready to invest into SEO, because that's what it is. Right. And that's why I was talking earlier about, they overvalue what they know. Like they know they need a website, but they undervalue what they don't know, which is, so you have a website, is it working for you? Is it getting attention? Is it getting leads? Is it helping you when people don't know who you are? A lot of times.
Isn't it the same as putting up a billboard on Route 66? It looked nice, but there's no traffic.
Right. And you can't convince every business owner that this is what they should do. Some of them, they're just not going to go for it. And in the early years, I interpreted that as I must have done something wrong, because surely they can see what I could see. And so it took a few years before I realized, it's you can't what do they say? You can't. It's going to sound horrible, but you can't teach a pig how to fly. You waste your time and you annoy the pig. So I'm just trying to find birds, okay? Birds
but the concept made Homer Simpson very rich. Yeah. Any more questions, Henrik?
Well, we have Dwayne say all myths, quote from 2013 Matt Cuts, somewhere between 25% to 30% of content on the web is duplicative. Yep.
Yeah, but even then you get into the realms of like curation. Is that duplicate? Is it curation? Because I mean, some people will. Well, it depends, really, doesn't it? Because some people will say it's curation, and all they're doing is literally copying from an RSS feed and probably putting at the top saying, "We found this," and then so 99% of the content is exactly the same. But then again, if it's accredited and things like that, there's all sorts of arguments around that, isn't there?
But we can ask ourselves, where do we get the penalty? Is that on duplicate content on our own side, or is that if we post anything else on another side? It's on.
Well, I think we're confusing duplicate content with uniqueness.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of non-unique content out there, but that doesn't mean it is duplicate.
Yeah, and Google, whenever Google say anything, it's more about what they don't say than what they do say, isn't it? It's very much reading between the lines and the subtle innuendos that it's very rare that they actually come out and tell you something straight, isn't it?
Well,
Adrian says, let's say I have an affiliate site. Can I take the same article I created for my money site, let's say best smartphones 2019, and post exactly the same article on my blogger site, Medium, etc.? I think that's on.
Can you? Of course you can.
Yeah.
But to what purpose? I guess would be my question.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of doing that would be to drive people back to your website, surely. So in that case, you'd want to probably post a snippet on your Blogger or your Tumblr, whatever, and point people back, have a link going back saying, read the full story here.
Yeah, you curate your own stuff.
Yeah, but the purpose of using social media is to drive the people back to the point of the sale, isn't it? Or the point of the click. And if the click isn't there on that page, then you push them through to where the sales page or whatever is. And yeah, so that's the whole thing. You've got to think what the purpose of the content is, what you're trying to achieve, and just putting content across social media for the sake of it is not achieving anything really. I mean, I sometimes do that with press releases. I'll always publish them on my blog first, but I always clearly state where the originating content is from. You know, if you want to put it on another blog that's supporting your site, then I don't know whether this is right or wrong, but I mean, the way I do it is I would put a same as in the schema, say, and pointing back to the originating article. Do you use that much, Caroline, in your schema, the same as? And
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we can take a look at when we are using the GMB poster, where we use the blogger aspects of a GMB post. We post that GMB post to the blogger, and we actually create it ourselves immediately on the blog post, and then we syndicated all that content out so it originates back from the GMB, and hopefully bring back some traffic to either the source site that we have targeted in the GMB or the GMB in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the way. Yeah, always there's got to be a purpose for the content to be there. So you need to figure out what the purpose is.
No, as Carolyn said, we don't create content for the content's sake. We create content for getting customers into our shop or to buy something, right?
Yep.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
We're doing well for questions here. Caroline, you're popular. They're queuing up. You see, yeah, duplicate content. Is it Caroline or is it duplicate content? It's one of the two, but we're getting loads of questions. Henrik.
Lisa says, on page has been stable, the stable of our success since 2011. Great info, Caroline. Tony says, web design make great clients if you're willing to white label your efforts and do SEO for their clients. Yep.
Yes, and that wasn't me, by the way.
Wasn't it?
It was another Tony, I think. Yeah.
Terry said, did I say Tony?
Oh,
Terry.
Sorry, you said Terry, did you? Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no, Terry Power.
Terry,
and
right,
Monica says, I'm a web designer and starting doing SEO for the reason that what I do is the correct for what I do is the correct for the SEO. I fix many finished sites with poor visibility. Okay, great, Monica.
Excellent. Thank you for those comments.
Anything else out there you want before we wrap it up?
Well, for me, I think we've sort of come to an end. I will, Caroline, is there any final parting thoughts you would like to add? Any sort of things that you really need to get across to the people before we all leave?
No, this has been great. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I've watched your guys' show, and this is great. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you for coming along. It's been great to meet you and chat with you today, and it's great to bring this topic to everybody that's been listening today and participating today. I thank everybody very much. I thank Caroline very much, and of course, Henrik, in charge of the controls. I'll pass over to you for the final goodbyes, and yeah, see you all next week.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline, for being on, even though Terry is asking a very late question. Caroline, what's the best way to check your on page? Oh, Tony, you know that. Hey, Terry, sorry.
And then that's a whole nother show, isn't it? That's a whole show in its own. So yeah.
We'll bring it up.
I think he's teasing there.
Thank you very much for being on, Caroline. And it was nice to have you, and see you around.
Yeah.
Take care. Ciao, ciao.
You too.